fits and et cetera. So it's not really a complaint. It's just a statement that when we're talking about a production coming up and the question of designers and directors, et cetera, is mentioned, it's never a person of color. There is never a person of color in that conversation. And only time that might come up is if I bring it up. And then, you know, there's a very, oh yeah, okay, well, we don't know that person, but sure, we're willing to, you know, maybe hear about it. But basically, it's you know, it's that kind of liberal response of we want to do that, but we don't know people who can do that. And then when we are talking about people of color, we're talking about people of color doing plays that are about people of color. Not just, you know, we're going to do a play about Abraham Lincoln and who would, you know, and let's think about who, you know, who would be a good partner for a playwright to do this, you know. And of course there are other extenuating circumstances, but bottom line, I think that's kind of a archetypal situation that a lot of artists of color find themselves in working in the kind of institutional theater world, that whether or not we want to remain on the inside or on the outside, on the edges, we are de facto relegated to the edges, you know, so that we're brought in, you know, if it's not always the February show anymore, we're brought in to do the, you know, the ethnic show, you know, or an ethnic show, and not, you know, where's, you know, Shakespeare? How come I don't get asked to do Chekhov? How come, you know, I love Tennessee Williams. I never in my career have been asked to direct anything other than a black, well, no, that's not entirely true, maybe one time. But, so, there.
Okay. I want to give you a sense of peace about that part of the conversation. There's a focus on it later on for quite a bit of time. So.
Thank you. But your initial question, yeah. I just felt like I needed to respond to that.
Up,
with that.
It keeps
yes,
coming up.
You know, it's a kind of in a way, it's a de facto marginalization that occurs that is maybe unconscious, you know, but nonetheless.
It's a whole other layer of mystery.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can. No,
coming around this way.
Oh.
No, Tanya, you go ahead.
Can I'll try to.
Can we hear Tanya?
Can you hear me? No. Sorry, guys. Going back to what Polly was saying, it's been as an artist. I know this is not the positive one, but it's been really positive for me in there with little gestures, like you were saying before in the last thing. Like they invited me to MC a benefit, or they invite me to openings, and that I feel like part of the family that doesn't cost them much, you know, to like make me feel included. And I feel like part of the dialogue and the conversation, I feel like in other situations where I've had commissions, it's like the commission, just the meetings about the commissions, and then how you're doing, you know, with an email. But I don't get included in like the life of the theater, you know. And I don't know if this is part of of how Steppenwolf works or part of the commission, but it's been, I still haven't produced the first script, but I've had a very like fertile life with Steppenwolf, just being part of the season by being invited to be part of the dialogue, you know?
Yeah, let me ask you, I think I can hear. When you say being included in the life of the theater, let me ask you to think about this a little bit. Opening nights, MC things that are happening. Do you feel like that is only helpful to you or a benefit to you if you're also part of the artistic consideration of this current season? I wonder, they're doing your plays, and now all of a sudden you're being asked to do these things. You weren't so much earlier, or were you?
Well, no, I mean, because of Ed. I came in because of Ed.
Yeah, right. Okay,
and I think I came in the right way. It was with House on Mango Street, and he knew before I knew that I should be doing that. I said no a couple of times, you know. And then it was the right way, because it was my palette, right? It was a Latino story, so it was like I got eased in.
Yeah.
And then that started actually with that.
I want to get to this because I think this is another one of the resources that we just don't use very well, which is we talk about place. That there are many writers, I know even here in DC, DC, there are many writers who aren't necessarily going to be produced at Arena, but that doesn't mean that that's the only way for people to be part of the life of Arena. And aren't there many writers living in communities where there are theaters that aren't going to produce them, who could actually be part of the family of that theater in a genuine way, without being the expectation being built, or is it always going to build an expectation?
Well,
I think that's going to feed back.
yeah. Building on that a little bit, and again, I've worked at Oregon Shakespeare Festival for only a couple of years, so I claim credit for none of this, but one of the things that we attempted to, that comes naturally, OSF is in rehearsal for 4 shows simultaneously now, and so naturally, what you get is all these artists hanging out together when they're not actually working on shows together. And one of the things of the goals that which we've actually done very badly so far of this commissioning program, American Revolutions, is that we bring the playwrights that we've commissioned together once a year so they can hang out and chat. And so I think institutions, even if it's just because you have a big building, to get your artists together, because artists are really good at taking care of one another, and sometimes I'm going to drop the ball, but if there's someone else, if there's the friend who's been through the process at OSF that they can talk to, I think it's really helpful, and I think it's just much healthier. I think one of the challenges of the way we produce theater generally, where it's serialized, is the isolation of the artist within the show doesn't build necessarily the healthiest overall life. So I would just encourage institutions to bring their artists together constantly and regularly.
All right, I have a couple of things, one related to that and then a little subject shift, if that's possible. When you're in a theater that isn't in a major urban area, this notion of inviting artists and being part of your community and place, there's just geographical challenges. So not everybody is privileged enough to live in an area like Washington or New York or Chicago where there's this thriving artistic community. And one of the ways that we have tried to address that, well, we've addressed a couple of other things, this is also a benefit of it, was we started about 10 years ago an artist retreat, where for 10 days in June we take over a local bed and breakfast type of, it's actually a really beautiful former mansion.
Way out in the boondocks of
Princeton. Okay, but you know what? Geography is geography,
I know,
and the point is that
the
artists that we work with don't live in our community by and large. They are imported. And so how you build, how you start to build those relationships and trust and all those themes that we've been talking about already in the last day and a half, start with FaceTime, being in the same place, getting to know each other, and frankly, building on what you were saying, building a community amongst the artists themselves.
Right.
Yes.
And when you are working in a place where the artists that you are working with, and in this case I'm talking primarily about writers, don't all live in the same community themselves, there's a different way for them to build community when normally they work very much in isolation, which is another theme that we've been hearing over and over again. So this retreat has been, I think, a wonderful and extremely effective, we didn't realize when we started it how effective it was going to be, way of both building community, supporting work, giving artists agency. Again, that's a theme that keeps coming up, to determine, they come to the retreat, they have no obligation. They can work on whatever they want. It can be a project for McCarter. It can be a project for somebody else. They can show up to a couple of dinners. If they want a reading, they have to tell us. We'll give them some actors. If they don't, we won't. And they get to chart their course and determine. And I just have to tell you, it's been amazing. All right, now I'm going to do a little subject shift.
Okay.
And I may get myself into trouble, but it's time. Somebody needs to get into trouble. I think as I've been listening to people talk, I think one of the issues about the communication, the transparency, has to do with the notion of hierarchy and and I think this is related to the conversation that began to break out in the last table about who has the power in the room. And I think that one of the things we don't talk about very much in a theater industry in which the majority of our artistic directors are directors, and if those directors are also directing the new plays, and when you have a situation where the playwright in the room is collaborating with the director, who's the artistic director, what does that do to the power dynamic? What does that do to that sense of artist agency? And not to say that every director is a terror, there have been many occasions where this is the most fabulous collaboration, but I have observed at a number of organizations that even with the best of intentions, just the very nature of the power of being the artistic director and then being the director of a new play changes the nature of what happens in that room. And it's very different than when you have a director who is coming in on a level playing field with the playwright, both as freelance artists in an institution. So I throw that out there.
Do you need this? Do you need this?
I don't know.
You probably do.
So I've been puzzled by the question for a while, and I was trying to figure out what, because I think you asked,
Your name, please.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm Jim Lasko from Red Moon in Chicago. I think you asked, you know, how is the relationship between artists and institutions, and where are the sore spots? And then I think the immediate response really was, Mara, you said, you know, I think the problem comes from artists sort of understanding there's a limited amount of resources in any given institution, but within our institution, we're able to take care of artists pretty well. And then we had that said in various ways around the table. I think that, so the question that you just brought up about where does who gets to make those decisions, where does the power sit is the issue, right? There's a dominant paradigm, and there are kingmaker institutions, be it Steppenwolf or Arena or whatever, who are saying this is the work and that we value, and here are the people we will make kings of, and we will give our plentiful resources to, versus and so the sense of why are there 500 theater companies in Chicago is that there are 475 people who believe, or companies who believe, that that paradigm isn't working or functioning. And they're coming up with their own responses to that, and those people are probably not so well voiced here.
Gary Leon Hill. I just want to represent those who are not in the room. And I don't know why I mean, I have questions about why I'm even invited to the table. As a playwright and as an old playwright, I'm not emerging, I'm not, I mean, I wrote a screenplay 30 years ago and submitted it to Actors Theater of Louisville. And John Jory decided that that was the thing to do this year. And then I practiced for the next 30 years. And what's happened now is something that's, that I'm, you talk about the edge, I'm on the edge of. I'm even on the outside of. I'm invited into the room and I'm at the table and I value that. The one thing that stuck up last in the earlier roundtable was the idea of unpaid time. I've heard that a lot, unpaid time, and I've heard a lot about health benefits and the rest of it. But there are a multitude of people outside this room who are working. Amy Freed put it very nicely at the roundtable. For what reason? I don't know. It's something more elemental. It's something more, I think, generally applicable to actual life as it evolves in the world. And I'm thankful I'm still alive. I'm thankful I still write. I would like to know, in fact, how to cooperate or engage with the incredible energy and talent and force in this room. There's something very entitled, not in a bad way, but what's happening here, I would like to think that what's happening here is not just. I would like to think that there's a way that what's consistent and what is continuous and what is connected and what is real and what throbs in the universe has a part here, and there is a way, there's an inclusiveness, there's a possibility of inclusiveness that does not